Hi, everybody. Lots of stuff to talk about tonight. This is Our Android Week with Alan Furstenberg in New York, Bruce Turner in Lynchburg, Virginia, Duke Carrico in Kingsport, Tennessee, Cadeas Kalut in Newport Beach, California, and in Menifee, California, Pam Azure. This is Our Android Week. Good to have you with us. We're going to begin with Apple. Everyone's talking about Apple today. The Worldwide Developer Conference, WWDC, which is more of a specifically software event than Google's equivalent I/O. At least it was today.
No, that's not true. I mean, it's a developer conference. So supposedly it's the same as I/O. The difference is that Apple typically also has a hardware event later in the year where they roll out their new hardware, and Google doesn't have an equivalent yet, so they just take advantage of I/O and try to do the same thing there. But they're both, at least officially, aimed at developers. The crowd was full of developers.
Okay.
And the opening video for WWDC was all about developers.
And the reason we're talking about it is the buzz in the street is that a lot of ideas that are in Android are now in iOS.
Yeah, this has been, what Apple is always accused of is that they take Google ideas and show them a few years later at WWDC, and everyone thinks they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they are the greatest thing since sliced bread, but Android had them first in almost every case. And that's true more or less this time as well. They took a number of great features that Android has, or the Google ecosystem as a whole, copied them outright, or copied them and improved on them in a couple of cases. So it was it's interesting to see what's coming for iOS 8 and OS X Yosemite later this year. But if you've paid attention to Google, you've seen some of them before.
Okay. I talked to Craig Shipp from our Google Plus Week show, who is currently in a hooping hangout, said, well, this is just, the most amazing thing. There's just no reason for any other phone system to exist, and on and on and on. I mean, I guess it was an impressive array of stuff, but of course, Craig is ignorant of Android. You are not, so
some of it was a very impressive array of stuff. So for example, it seems like, depending on how well it works, Apple may finally understand what in the world the internet is used for. So that's impressive to see. On the other hand, they're also doing some stuff that Google isn't, which is quite advanced and clever about presence location. So they're introducing features into both OS X and iOS that if you are carrying your phone and you walk up to your desktop machine, they will recognize each other and say, hey, I see you're in the middle of writing email on one. Do you want to write it on the other one instead? Or walk up to the two, have the two next to each other, and if your Mac doesn't have a network connection, it will just automatically try to use your phone for a network connection. Things like that, where they're aware of each other and aware of the rest of the environment and do some smart things with that.
Couldn't you simulate the same thing by, if you started an email and then you forgot to hit send, you could go to your phone and hit view drafts and you'd see it there, right?
You can. The difference is part of it, I think, is going to be in the difference in how it's done. Because right now, in order to do that on the in the Google way of doing things, you need to be constantly synchronizing with the cloud. It sounds like what's going to happen with Apple is it's only going to do that synchronization on demand. And it'll be a little bit smarter about saying, hey, I think you might want to do this. Do you want to do it?
But wouldn't this be the same thing like Project Tango, though? Wouldn't this be like a
a miniature version of Project Tango, seeing as though as everything's, you know what's going on around you, the devices know what's going on around you, they know where you are. I mean,
it is, and that's a good point. I think it kind of takes it to the next step and says, hey, we're going to do this on the OS level. And we're going to give you ways that your apps will be able to tap into this on the OS level. So your app, an example that I gave earlier is that presumably iChat will be able to automatically let you drop off and pick up conversations on whichever device you happen to be sitting at. And yes, Hangouts do that now, but that's something that's built into Hangouts. It's not built into the operating systems. There are no libraries that are provided to do that, one. And two, it only works so-so on Hangouts. It beeps you everywhere if you get an incoming message still. Whereas, presumably, this sort of thing would only beep you in the place where you're actually working, and it would know which device you want to be using at the time.
That's one aspect of Hangouts I haven't ran into. I know initially it beeps you everywhere, but once you've chosen a device that you're working on, then it would only continue conversating on that device. It works flawless for me, but maybe it doesn't work that well for you.
It doesn't work flawless for me on that. And this actually also points out one of the other interesting features that it sounds like they're going to be introducing with this connection, is that voice calls and SMS are going to be able to work on the desktop, and that's by leveraging your phone, not by leveraging any outside source. We're going to have to see if Hangouts are going to go that route, or exactly what route they're going to take to do the same thing.
Well, it's interesting. I actually don't like that route, though. I would prefer for it to run through the cloud as opposed to running, because basically they're using AirDrop or some type of mesh style setup, and I don't know. I don't know if I like that.
I think it's an interesting approach, and I think I'm not saying it's the best approach, but what it does do is it means you don't need to get a new telephone number, which is what Google Voice needs you to do.
Unless you're a Sprint customer.
Yeah, but who cares about you guys anyway?
It rocks if you're in the forest. Says the guy in the forest. Okay, so anything else on that?
No, I just, it's easy in a lot of ways to dismiss a lot of what Apple did, but they did a couple of things that took classic Android components and extended them in some logical ways, and I hope we see Android doing the same thing. But finally, what I really hope is that this year's I/O is a developers conference, and the keynote is a developers keynote. Last year, officially it was a developers conference, but they said almost nothing to developers in the keynote. Here, Apple has come out swinging, and Google needs to respond.
Well, of course, it's not stealing because Android's open, so anybody's free to take whatever they want, but the reverse is not the case. So, on the one hand, it's perfectly legal and ethical. It's not... I
didn't say it wasn't legal and ethical. I didn't even say that it's a good thing.
But it is kind of hypocritical for them to be suing Samsung and everybody about copying their features when they're wholesale doing the reverse just because Google's open with their system and they're not. Even though it's legal and they are legally correct, it's still kind of,
Well,
Steve
we do also
Ballmer-ish.
have to say there were a lot of really good digs by Apple at Android, and they were direct digs. I mean, there was an Android up on the screen there.
As far as it looked as though they're building the mechanisms for other developers to connect into. I noticed that it's a little different from what Apple. Usually, Apple builds their own platform and everything, but in this case, they were like for example, the HomeKit. It's like they're building things for developers to actually use this time around versus just, hey, this is what we have everybody shut out for a while. So that's kind of a difference from Apple.
It's not that different. They're actually pretty good, at least when they announce things at the developer conference, at creating things that are meant for everyone to tap into. So in the past at these conferences, last year they announced iBeacon, and that was very open and very inviting. In the past, I believe they've announced things like WebKit. This is where they announced WebKit as an open source project. So Apple, Apple likes a closed ecosystem, but it's more like they like a walled garden. They love people to play in their garden. They love developers in their garden, but it's their garden. And in some ways, that's better sometimes than what you see others doing, and that includes Google, who has walled gardens where they're not letting people play in them.
Not that you've ever discussed that.
No, not at all.
The times it was always the first question for Vic from you. When will we get a right API for Google+?
And it will be the first question I ask Dave when we interview him.
Absolutely. Okay,
Unless, of course, they give us a really nice announcement at I/O.
Yeah, it's kind of the Vine program from Google, where you get free stuff and say all the right things. Okay, so just as a random aside, we mentioned Microsoft. I thought it was interesting to hear that former CEO Steve Ballmer allegedly, I don't know what the current status is, won the bidding war for the LA Clippers. So I'm thinking, like, who do I despise more? This racist guy or Steve Ballmer from the Scroogle? It's like, what's that line? Toughest call since the Iran-Iraq war.
Did you get your Scroogled hat, Dan?
I did not. I should.
I did. My Scroogled baseball cap arrived today. I'm going to be wearing it at I/O.
I'll tell you, I don't wear hats anymore because I wore a hat. We were off the air. I was wearing a baseball hat, and you guys made fun of me because my head's so big. And Michael Banks said the hat looked like a condom. And so I haven't worn a hat since then. So I'm now hatless. But anyway, now everyone can see my bald spot. All right, so Google demos Android Wear notifications. I'm very excited about Android Wear and these smartwatches that are coming. The LG G, which I initially panned because it's boxy and ugly, but it's not so boxy and ugly in the other pictures I've seen. And the Moto 360, which I think the rumor is $250, or at least a leak suggested that would be the price, which I think is very doable. I think that has mass market appeal. It would, if it was the first good one to come out for like $100 is going to be in every Christmas stocking. A huge hit. But it's the first iteration. They had to do everything from scratch because it's round. So anyway, Google has demoed some Android Wear notifications. Alan, you're the expert in this, and the author of a book from O'Reilly about Google Glass development, which you can buy. I've bought, and I've been negligent in editing chapters since I did like the first few, but copy editing, not editing, because I don't know what the hell they're talking about. But anyway, it's a great book. I recommend it. So Alan, tell us what you think about these Android Wear things.
It's pretty interesting. One of the big criticisms we heard when Glass first came out was, what can you use it for besides notifications and text messages? And we're now seeing this repeated a little bit with Android Wear. The first round of stuff that's come out essentially teaches you how to push your notifications to the watch instead of showing it up on the screen, and what basic interaction you can do with it there. I think this is a great start. This kind of starts to give you a feel for what wearables are good for. Not, you can't use them for everything. You don't want to use them for everything. But here are some things that it is good for. Let's start playing around and figuring out what it's really good for in this space. So I'm thrilled to see it, and I'm equally thrilled to see that it was Timothy Jordan that posted some of these. And it sounds like it's going to be Timothy Jordan that is going to be talking about some of these at I/O. He's got a session at I/O that I'm very excited to see.
So I'm clicking through as you talk here. I'm clicking through some of these notifications. How do you compare these to the Glass experience?
I'd say it's very similar. I'd say it's very similar to Glass.
Similar is an understatement. They are very, very close.
So they're clearly stealing from Glass.
Well,
one silo is stealing from the other.
I think Glass taught a number of important lessons, and I think the Wear team has taken some of those lessons and they've spun it in a slightly different way. It's not they're not identical. Conceptually, they are very, very similar, though, and I think that's a good thing because I think Glass has the right concept. And I think Wear adopting a similar concept and tailoring it for their specific needs is a great step. So,
and of
for
course,
example,
they've had the benefit of all your feedback from Glass, right?
exactly. So I mean, one of the projects I would like to work on, and anybody who is out there who would like to work on this with me, please let me know, is adapting some of the APIs that we've been using for Glass, adapting them so they work with Android Wear. So using the Mirror API to send stuff to Wear instead, so that it makes it so that if you want to write some Glassware or you want to write some Android Wear apps, there would be almost no difference between the two. I'd like to work on that, and I think that's a very doable thing, because even though the layouts look somewhat different on the two, the concepts are so similar that I think they could be adapted well.
It's attractive too. And there's not a whole lot going on because there's not a lot of real estate.
Well, you don't want a whole lot going on. Remember,
Right.
you want this to be a glanceable device. You don't want to. I mean, you don't want to be staring at your wrist like this in order to read the whole thing. You just kind of want to glance at it the same way you glance at the time.
And some folks are going to want to make a ladies' watch version that's a smaller form factor. Because like I saw on the, I don't know, the Moto 360 or the LG, whichever, I think the 360, they showed a woman wearing it. It was just, I mean, it was ridiculously big. It was almost the size of her wrist. And they may want to do a form factor for smaller, little folks like me with smaller wrists, or ladies to, you know, still be able to read it. So I think that's a good thing. So there. Any thoughts, Cadeas, on Android Wear and this new thing?
No, actually, I've been really looking into it, so I'm waiting. Can't wait till the end of the month.
All right, cool. So while Cadeas closes his blinds, I'm going to jump to the next topic here. Okay, powered by Pano, focused on gaming, Google to announce Android TV at Google I/O in June. So, Alan,
I'm going to toss this right over to Cadeas. I want his thoughts on it.
Okay, cool, because he's more of a...
Unless he's still reading the article.
Well, yeah, I'm still reading the article. Let's go with that.
You want to sum it up for a second while Cadeas...
Go ahead, sum it up while I finish the tail end of this.
The gist of it that I remember boils down to the Android, the Google TV team, who eventually moved over to Chrome and helped create the Chromecast, kind of left this vacancy in the Android team. So the guys that went and built the Q are now going on and building their game console, again based on Android. And it's going to be more than a game console. It'll also be the TV console, and I don't know. I think I missed something in there, like why anyone would believe them this time, when this is essentially the exact same strategy that they pulled with Google TV that failed pretty badly.
The
so I don't know,
Q was a hit.
Why is this time different?
Do you think that a game console is necessary at this point? I mean, do you think another game console coming into the market is necessary?
No.
So I don't know how, and again, this is all speculation because we don't really know what's really going on. But I mean, I just don't know how they think. I guess marrying the television, the Chromecast stuff with the game console would kind of draw it in. But then you have the Xbox at that point, because that's kind of what Xbox does and has done for the last maybe 5-6 years. So I don't know. I'm more ready to see this come out than I am anything else. I want to actually see what the final product looks like. Because
question. Tell me this, Cadeas. Like when Final Fantasy X came out, a buddy said, "Oh my God, it's the best ever game." I bought a PS2 just to play that game because I think it was proprietary just to that. I think that they released it just for the PS2. So typically now, when a game comes out that's like a hit game, is it typically on all of them or just on one? And are people expected to buy multiple things?
Well, that's very
And is that
varies
practical?
depending
Because your
on-
audience is young people mainly, and they don't have the money to buy 4 different gaming consoles, right?
Well, that technically that varies because it depends on the person, the software development team that's making it. So if it's EA Games, they may want to release it on everybody, whereas this next group may have like Bungie may have a contract with only Microsoft and they're only going to make games with Microsoft. So it depends on who makes them. And then games have kind of shifted and they don't actually focus on storyline like you say Final Fantasy. They're more about shoot 'em ups now and stuff like that. So that kind of changes the target audience. But as far as this Android TV, I am not sure. I mean, technically, Google TV was positioned to be a gaming console. It could run an Android game if it was built for it. Even the controller, or even the remote, had all the keys ready for that type of stuff, and it never actually happened. So there has to be an incentive to the software developers to force them to want to make this. So there's something that needs to be revolutionary on this platform that's going to make somebody go and do it. Go ahead, Alan.
Well, I think the difference here about what would prompt them to make it is that we've got more Android games now.
So then there needs to be a massive, massive, massive Google I/O Android games category that's supposed to really target this system. It better be well integrated with Unity. There's a whole bunch of things that this new device needs to do to be able to compete.
But we have that. And let's remember, last year when we were talking about I/O, it was just filled with games, with all information about what would eventually become Google Play Games. So there were a good 10 or 12 sessions on that subject, plus a couple of workshops.
But here's what you're asking. You're asking phone developers, software developers that mainly target phones, to basically, if you're going to take this box and connect it to a TV, you're saying I'm going up against Xbox and PlayStation. So
here's the thing. I don't think that's what they're trying to say.
But that's how the market's going to look at it.
Right.
Regardless of what they're trying to say, the market's going to look at it, and so you're looking at a failed product if it cannot perform on those levels. So great, we've solved the TV problem. We got the Chromecast here. We got Chromecast and Apple TV and Roku all combined into one box, and it works flawless. And this box also does games. But the games, if this is really true, the games is the part that's supposed to be the selling point that's supposed to draw everybody in. So the question is this device powerful enough to get other developers' attention? Will EA Games or whoever decide that, okay, we're going to also start building games on this too? Like, if it's not going to do that, to take this box and now plug it up to the TV, it's a failed product before it even starts, if it cannot compete with the other ones. If it's not even close enough. It's got to at least beat out Nintendo. And if it can't do that, then they're just wasting their money. This is a waste of money and a waste of time, and they should focus more on the television side. Because I honestly, even though it's unplugged and on the top shelf now, I honestly love Google TV. And had it actually caught on like it should have, if it wouldn't have been Honeycomb and all the other things that murdered it, and it actually caught on how it's supposed to, it's a really good interface. It's a really good UI for just television alone. It's a really good UI, at least the original. So
I don't see anything compelling about any of these products as far as TV, Google TV, Apple TV, Roku, that can beat just hooking your computer up to your television set and using it as a second screen. That's true.
That's true. That's true. There are times when I just sit down
if you don't have that,
I'm just going to watch a movie or a TV show right here. I don't feel like going and doing all that in there. And then there are times where I'm just going to stay in there. I don't want to be in front of the computer. There's no real reason that throws me on one versus the other.
The compelling feature, Dan, is you're thinking about it wrong, actually. Because nobody cares about connecting their computer to a television anymore. If they're not watching it on a mobile device, then they're using a dedicated device on their TV. Almost nobody is connecting their computer to a TV anymore.
I don't do that at all.
Well, my TV happens to be on my desk here, right?
Right. Now, Dan, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Right. I'm not typical. I understand that.
And we're just saying that nobody does that.
That was like 2006.
It's an incredibly rare scenario these days Whereas thinking of your TV as an extremely large tablet is a much more common way to look at it. And I think that's what Chromecast was trying to tap into. And that's why I'm concerned that if Android TV, Android TV could treat it that way. And maybe they'll do good if they do. But if they do things like, you need a funky remote control that has a keyboard, I don't see it going anywhere. I mean, as brilliant as that was, that's just not a usable interface. Let's keep going.
Okay. And I want to share one comment here. Make sure there's nothing secret on my screen. From, is it Mady Crit? I think. The best thing about, when you were talking about the multiple notification, or the syncing between Gmail and or iOS stuff, he said the best thing about Hangouts is that the conversation and notifications continue only on the device you're using. That's cool. Even if we switch.
But it doesn't work that well for Alan.
That's not how it works for me.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It works that way. I mean, I got freaking 15 devices, and they'll all go no. But then when I pick up one and I start messaging, then none of the other ones make noises when people are replying. Now, if I sit it down and don't use it for 3 or 4 minutes, then they all do the wave again of all the noises. So.
Also, we have this comment from Matthew Rappaport. Quote unquote, we're just saying, Dan McDermott, that nobody does that besides you, Alan Furstenberg. June 2nd, 2014. Yeah, so he finally found the odd thing about me. Okay.
The odd thing about you?
It's called self-deprecating humor. So there's that. Okay, so next is, please keep the comments coming. We love comments. We will read them on the air, even if they make fun of us. Actually, we prefer those, especially if they make fun of Alan. Those
You're
always
reaching, Dan.
go to the head of the line. And then if they added another one here, if they added video hangouts, that would be a killer feature. What does he mean there? Most AAA games are multi-platform. If they add video hangouts, I guess that's on the Google TV he's talking about. Maybe.
It would be interesting to integrate Hangout technology, broadly speaking, and this is something I've been begging for 3 years now.
And didn't they do well? That's Chrome whatever for meetings. Okay, never. But that's still kind of the same thing. I don't know.
I mean, it's certainly, we've seen Hangout apps on the desktop. We haven't seen them on mobile yet, and there's a lot of potential there. But there's a lot of barriers in the way of developers wanting to adopt that platform.
All right, so next up is Motorola Mobility's U.S. Moto X assembly plant to close by the end of the year. I don't think this was unexpected, right?
It's actually pretty unexpected. One of the things that everyone was saying was the reason why Lenovo purchased Motorola was to buy U.S.-based manufacturing. So this came as something of a surprise. So, officially, one of the reasons why they bought Moto was to get a bigger foothold here. This is saying the opposite. So, I don't know. This does not
Maybe
make
operating costs in America is a little too expensive.
Yeah, but it means a faster turnaround time, which is why it was expected they were going to at least keep a plant here. And, Lenovo's been building here. It's not like they didn't have manufacturing plants here before.
From a purely, I mean, if you, all like jingoism aside, if you look at it from a purely economic standpoint, while there are some people who look for the union bug on a product or look for a Made in America sign and will buy that way, that will say, I'm not going to go to Walmart, I'm going to go to a small local, farm to table, whatever. Those are very, very few numbers. Most people could care less. They shop on price and quality and functionality, probably in that order. maybe not, but the mass public. So
Well,
if
here's the thing.
you know,
I think factored into that, and factored into that more and more, is speed. There are people, I mean, you look at orders. One of the things that Dell really was able to tap into was that they were able to ship your computer to you within 3 days to your specifications. So you'd get a new computer in 3 days after you ordered it. You look at Amazon Prime, there's clearly a need that people like ordering stuff and getting it delivered to them as fast as possible. You order a cell phone from Korea or China, and it's shipped over by boat after it's manufactured. So while you're getting some cost savings, it's at a huge time cost, and that's not acceptable for some people. Which is why Lenovo and the Chinese manufacturer whose name escapes me have looked at moving some, not all by any means, but some
Foxconn.
manufacturing back to the U.S.
Foxconn,
Foxconn, thank you, have looked at moving some manufacturing to the U.S.
they'd save
Because
on
the
suicide nets.
Well, part of it is because the costs aren't that much different anymore. China's costs of living have gone up. Yes, there's still a difference, but it's not as dramatic as it used to be.
India is
partly
having
because
that
of
issue with
turnaround time.
coders. India's parts of India are having that issue with coders. That they used to be just dirt cheap, 50 cents a day for some sweatshop coding factory, but now the demand is such that some of those guys are making almost as much as you'd make stateside here, and so now they're looking at the Philippines and places, Indonesia, or whatever.
So yeah, on one hand, this wasn't really a huge surprise, but it's a bit of a surprise.
Okay. All right, so next up is Dell has this VentureBeat saying Dell bridges work and play with Android tablets, hybrid Windows laptop tablets, and compact all-in-one desktops. One's kind of a freaky looking thing. We're seeing more and more of these. I'm just sort of mentioning this.
You're going to have to tell me about this one because I fell asleep trying to read through it.
Yeah,
I still didn't care.
7 and 8 inch Android-based Dell Venue tablets. Everyone's got, I mean, they're all kind of the same, I guess. If you're used to buying stuff from Dell, if you're used to buying stuff from Samsung, if you're part of the small number of people who even know that the Play Store sells hardware, you could get a Google one like I did. But it's good to see that these are coming out, and they're all competing on trying to get a good price point and good quality, and so someone will win and the consumer will benefit by having lots of choices. So I just wanted to mention that. So there. Okay, next is another Transformer. I guess it's book 5. I don't know if it's book V or book 5. It's a Windows hybrid laptop with a detachable Android phone. And recently on this program, or on Google Plus Week, I think it was this program, we discussed that Google had filed a patent for some sort of device with the similar features here. So I guess Engadget likes it. Wow, just wow. Asus has just announced a Transformer Book 5, a Windows 2-in-1 laptop with a detachable Android phone, which is basically what I just said. So let's look at the pictures here and see what it looks like. So the phone kind of slides into the back of the screen. That's interesting and weird. It's more like, I wouldn't call it
You want interesting and weird slides into the back. We're going to be covering something in about 3 stories that fits that bill.
I wouldn't really call it a detachable phone. I would call it more a laptop with a phone docking station, right? In other words, most of the time the phone's going to be in your pocket. So as far as is the glass empty or full, it's basically it's a combo Android phone and laptop where when you get home or at work, you can slip the phone into the back, and I assume there's software on that computer that will allow you to make phone calls, and it's charging the phone, all that stuff. So I think it's a very interesting thing. Yeah, I guess it's less weird looking than I initially expected. Does this appeal to you guys in any way? Or is this just too weird?
Not the least bit.
Okay. So it's a winner. Even the guy who has the Nexus Q doesn't like this. So there. All right, the Transformer Book 5. And at least by reading the article, we determined it was 5 and not V. Next up is HP is announcing a 14-inch Android laptop and 2 new Chromebooks. So, okay. Let's see what the price points are on these. GigaOhm's slow to load. Maybe because I'm streaming video. $400. In fact, to bring up Craig Shipp, my favorite troll again, I was on the phone with him this morning or yesterday, and his dad called him. He said, hang on, I got to talk to my dad. And he said his dad was thinking about buying one of those netbooks or a $300 Windows phone for somebody. And he said he didn't think, he said that's probably going to be crap, that for $300 you should probably buy a Chromebook, because this was, I think, for an elderly lady, and basically she wanted to do Facebook and email and stuff.
Craig said this?
Craig said at that price point, I know, oh my God. But I think I said, yeah, if she's not going to, I mean, she's not going to be, you know, she's probably 70 or 80. She's not going to be editing video and stuff. If she's mainly cloud-based, I think absolutely a Chromebook, you're going to get better hardware for your buck, because you're not paying for all this stuff. You're not paying for Windows OEM. You're not paying for the traditional things you would need for a traditional non-cloud-based computer, right? Or am I wrong? I mean, I would think that a Chromebook's hardware, if you're looking at a $300 Windows netbook or machine versus a $300 Chromebook, I'm thinking that the processor and stuff would be better on the Chromebook, or is that wrong?
Well, it's not so much that the processor, even if they're the same processor, it'll feel a little zippier on the Chromebook, because Chrome OS is a much lighter weight system than Windows is, even a stripped down Windows. And with what they're doing here, which is putting Android on it, that's interesting. Android, in a lot of ways, is an even more basic operating system. So, I don't know. I think the question the article raises, and of course they raise it without answering because they don't know, is just what is Android going to be like on a laptop? And that's true for the previous two stories as well. You know,
looking
we don't know
at
what
this,
it's going to be
okay,
like.
looking at these screen caps, is that Chrome OS or is that Android?
I think except for the blue one that says Chrome OS, or that says Chrome, I have no idea on the top two, because they look nothing like Chrome OS.
So they're probably some version of Android. I'm glad that HP, after the horrific fail that was their, what was it, the Slate or something, they ended up almost pulling a Atari and burying them in the desert, that they've gone with Android and Chrome. I think that's cool. Good for them, because they do make good quality hardware.
We really need to see. I mean, I think the most worrying thing about these books, as they point out, is that it's running Android 4.3 and not 4.4. I mean, if you're going to launch something now, why aren't you on the most recent operating system?
Well, when you say launch something, let's get back to your previous discussion when you said you're building these overseas. At some point, you're like, okay, we're done. Now we have to make them, and there's a lag of 6 months. Then we announce.
Well, that's fine, but then why don't you launch it and say that when you boot it up, the Android 4.4 upgrade will be immediately available?
I guess because it's not immediately available.
That would be a good guess.
Matey Crit says it would look weirder with the phone detached. Of course, you wouldn't see it because it's behind the monitor. We're talking about the laptop Android phone hybrid. And he says that's what I get my family members and anyone that doesn't need to install binaries. Chrome OS seems to be taking over. Matthew Rappaport, he always yells at me if I don't pronounce the T. It's Android Week, but talking about WWDC 14, what was the most impressive announcement specifically about iOS phones and iPads? Device connectivity, hands-free. Hey, sir. I don't know. I don't think they said much about hardware.
Well, they didn't talk about hardware, but if we have time at the end of the show, we'll talk about it more.
Okay. Because we know our fans love hearing about Apple, especially.
Well, the only thing that I'm glad about HP, and keep in mind, I think HP absorbed or somehow took over Compaq, and they used to make just such a horrible computer systems, and so I'm glad that they're not touching any software anywhere. Maybe on the Android when they will start a little bit, but I'm glad like when these Chromebooks come out, they're just Chromebooks. There's not all this extra junk added on there to bog the system down and make it run slow. But I'm a little concerned about the Android side of their laptops that they're making.
Okay.
Because they have the ability to pack on junk, and I don't see why they wouldn't.
Indeed. Okay, so next up is a report that Microsoft Smartwatch coming soon with support for Android and iOS.
And actually, Dan, you did miss a few comments.
Go ahead.
See. Nick Dollars went on to say that Google needs to improve multitasking functionality of Android before it's useful on a laptop. The apps need to offer more functionality than the larger screen, and he still enjoys Windows or Linux more on a laptop. And then he went on to say that he gets frustrated using slicker Android apps that lack functionality on the desktop, or lack functionality on the desktop equivalent.
This is a brilliant point. This is a really, really, really good point. And I'm kind of two minds about it. And let me explain.
Say it again real quick, please. I missed it.
What was that, Dan?
Can you say it again real quick?
The point is, the point that he's making, and I'm going to paraphrase it, is that Android apps aren't as full-featured as their desktop counterparts. So even the same app for mobile won't be the same app as on the desktop, which makes sense. Because traditionally, on a mobile device, you're dealing with more constrained screen, you're dealing with a more constrained input, you're dealing with a more constrained UI, you're dealing with a lot of things that are more constrained. More constrained memory, more constrained CPU. Dan is so excited about this, he's already walked away from the screen. And traditionally, with Android, that's true. We started seeing kind of shifts coming, though, with tablets. So tablets had a slightly bigger screen than the phones did. They had slightly more CPU. They had slightly more memory. You were seeing them being a little more capable than their phone counterparts. Now, with these devices, you're seeing them even more capable. You're seeing the keyboards built in, so you're seeing a better UI. You're seeing the combination of touch and trackpad. You're seeing more memory. You're seeing a slightly higher-end CPU because you can dissipate the heat better. You're seeing larger storage. So you're seeing more capable devices now running an application that was written for a very constrained phone. That's going to cause problems. The answer needs to be that app authors need to get smarter. They need to realize that if this is installed on a more capable device, give it the more capable user experience. If it's installed on the more restricted device, give it the more restricted user experience. We need to be developing our software a lot smarter. And it's the same thing that I tell people when they're moving from an Android phone to Glass. You don't want to just port the software over. That's going to suck for everyone. In the same way, you don't want to take your Android app that you wrote for your phone and toss it on a desktop, because that's going to suck too. As developers, we need to be more careful about that. Google is trying to beat the drum and make people understand. I don't know how well people are listening.
Then he goes on to say that there's still a huge gap between Android games and console gaming, although game consoles are hitting the ceiling as far as next gen, so eventually Android devices will need to close the gap to catch up, linking with the laptops and everything else. So, and even going back to the TV thing that we were talking about, Android TV, if they're going to do gaming, everything's got to be made for that device.
What's the reason? Is it processing power or the screen size? The reason that like a Xbox would be a superior experience or whatever than...
It would probably be, it's a combination of everything, actually. It's a combination of everything, so.
Okay. I wish there was one comment thing that would show all the comments. You know what I mean?
Who to complain to.
Yep. Not complain. It's free, right?
I think the new one works pretty well, Dan. So.
Well, I'm using the standalone, which is because I can
Yeah.
I can stick them on the screen, right?
Yeah, the standalone you can throw up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So next is Microsoft reportedly releasing a smartwatch soon, and it will have support for Bluetooth notifications from iOS and from Android. I gotta tell you, if I don't see them, we'll see. I could eat my words, but I don't see them being a player necessarily in smartwatches. I see that if Apple comes out with an iWatch, that will be a huge hit, and if the Moto 360 and the LG G will be hits, I would think, because they seem to be. Both companies put out pretty good quality stuff, and they both look. Motorola is obviously known for solid hardware, and
I think the
LG's
most
thing
interesting
looks good.
thing that comes from this is that Microsoft is being pragmatic, Google has been pragmatic, even Apple has shown some pragmatism in recent releases. Well, even historically, Apple has been somewhat pragmatic. We're seeing these kind of cross-platform things. It'll be interesting to see how everyone else reacts. So right now, although Glass is both Android and iOS, it's not Windows Phone. I don't imagine it will be for a long time. Android Wear right now is just Android. Kind of difficult for it to be anything else, but will a hypothetical iWatch be iOS only? Pretty guaranteed. So Microsoft knows they've got to be pragmatic about this. If they want anybody to use it, if they stand a chance at getting it out there, they need to be compatible with the leaders in the field.
I'll tell you what would be a smart play is, although they'd probably do a branched version or forked version, whatever you want to call it, is for Amazon to come out with a watch that would alert you to, hourly deals at Amazon, or you know what I mean? Because they've got, every time they come out with one of these hardware things, it's always like the #1 item on Amazon. My mom loves her Kindle Fire HD. She has like 3 or 4 different Kindles. Okay. All right, so kudos to Microsoft.
And speaking of throwing spaghetti against the wall,
Samsung and Oculus team up on virtual reality. Oculus, of course, now owned by Facebook. What's this about? I missed this.
so this is interesting. At the AWE, Augmented World Expo, last week, one of the things that came out was that apparently Samsung and Oculus have signed a deal such that Samsung will get early access to Oculus software and Oculus will get access to early Samsung hardware. And the two of them will work together. Or did I get that backwards? No, I think I had that correct. And the two of them will work together on future virtual reality platforms. And the pictures all show a nifty headset where you slide your phone into the back of the headset and it does some cool VR stuff. I'm incredibly dubious. This really seems like it has a limited set of applications. It looks really cool. Conceptually, it seems really cool. I just can't see this being something that takes off.
Yeah, the Oculus thing, I think, is cool. The 2 applications that come to mind, 3. One is games, obviously.
And it should be clear, that's what Oculus is aiming at right now, are games.
Also, they're being used by the military. I don't know what country it is. I don't think it's the U.S., but they're tank drivers are using it. They'll have cameras above the tank or outside the tank for a 360 view, right? And so the tank driver, of course, he doesn't want to stick his head up and look because he'll get his head shot off. But he has the Oculus thing, and he can look around and see where he's going, and you know who might be coming up to him or something. And then for operating drones or UAVs or these little kid, you know, the toy ones that are like now a couple $1,000s. So for that. All right, next up, Forbes. Well, this is kind of a loaded article, but the bottom, it's about Samsung is introducing, I think in Russia initially, it's a Tizen phone. So Forbes has a nice clickbait article called "The Master Plan: Why Samsung is Ditching Android." So I don't know a whole lot about Tizen. I'm hoping you guys do.
I don't know a lot yet. From what I gather, though, it has some similar foundations as Android. It's built on top of Linux, but it's closer to WebOS in the sense that it's drawing a lot of its application framework from HTML5, which is something that Google is also pushing very heavily on Chrome OS. So it's actually closer to Chrome OS than it is to Android. But it's got an Android compatibility layer that wasn't clear to me. I read that somewhere. Yeah, Cadeas is shrugging. He doesn't know either.
There can't possibly be the
I
number.
stay away from that platform.
There can't possibly be any close to the number of apps you could get for Tizen versus iOS and Android.
But Dan, that's what they said about Android 4 years ago.
And also, if is this, what's the allure? Why not? They're already making Android phones. Why would they do this? Is it more popular in Russia, or is it lower cost?
Because they want to get away from Google's oversight.
Well, it could be an experiment.
I mean, you know, the Galaxy Gear 2 started out as Tizen. The Galaxy Gear just got an upgrade that moves it to Tizen from Android, which is where I heard there was some Android compatibility layer. So it's clear that they feel that Samsung feels like they've been done wrong by Google, one way or another, and they want to get out of Google's thumb, out of Google's control.
Well, they could. It kind of doesn't make sense, Alan, because if they use Android, they could fork Android like Amazon did. They don't have to put the Play Store in there. They can have their own Samsung store, which sucks and no one uses. They're going to have to do all that with Tizen.
They already have that. They already have that, Dan, the Samsung store.
Yeah, but they have it on Android as well. And
Right.
I don't ever use it. Every day I get a thing saying, do I accept their terms of service? And I just swipe it off my phone.
If you had the ability to just not have to deal with it altogether, wouldn't you take that route? If you think you could stand on your own 2 feet? That's what this is. This is an experiment to see if they can stand on their own 2 feet, and if they can't, then they just go back to the users, just throwing everything at the wall, like he says, spaghetti on the wall, and see what sticks. They're just trying to see if they have the ability to stand on their own 2 feet. If it catches on, great. If not, hey, it's okay. We move on to the next thing.
It's clearly an experiment. We all agree on that, I think. Well, you know, we'll see.
Then it was more of a first to the market kind of thing. Hey, we're the first one with an actual functioning smartwatch. Remember Samsung? Our name's in the front. We had the watch. It's just one of those things. So
and they
can do whatever they want. They
got first.
Yeah.
All right. So there. Next up is Uber switches new drivers to Android. Uber is the taxi cab app thing or private car sharing. None of the drivers actually are not really employed by Uber. They're independent contractors. You can sign up and become one. And in the past, they've given you an iPhone. And then you would have your regular phone to make phone calls, but you'd have a dedicated iPhone that would run the Uber app. And it's kind of like eBay, where you get to vote on drivers, but that's kept secret to other drivers, so they can decide whether to agree to pick you up. And the drivers, the customers can rate the drivers, and that's public. So you can decide, okay, this guy's got, Cadeas has 5 stars, and he's 3 minutes away from me, so I'm going to go with him. And then he'll drive me, and you pay through the app, so no money changes hands. The tip's included. It's a very modern feature. But now they're switching to Android, so new drivers are going to get an Android phone with an Android app, and they're going to be preloaded on AT&T phones. I don't know if that's national or because they're not everywhere. They're kind of like area. They're not
Yeah, but
nationwide yet.
the apps can be preloaded everywhere.
Sure.
I mean, why not?
But it
'Cause
might
if
be
people
like, what is
travel,
this? I
you're
can't
not
use it.
gonna
Why
do
would it
that.
be on my phone? Right? But I think it's going to be on all
But
phones.
people travel, Dan. Dan, people travel. So granted,
True,
you may be
true.
Bentonville, Virginia, but now you get on an airplane and you find yourself in Orange County, and now there's 40 Uber cars down the street. So like, that's just how it works.
Well,
So-
it's smart because
part of this also is to make it so that, hey, you get a new phone, you see this Uber app, what does it do? Hey, there's nobody in your area. Do you want to become an Uber driver? So this is part of their goal to get, as they put it in the article, Uber everywhere.
And I'm seeing it I'm literally seeing Uber stuff by the day around here. I went from not seeing maybe one or two a month, and now just about everybody over here is an Uber driver of some sort.
they don't. How do you know? I know the one company, Lyft, has a giant mustache.
Inside their car, there's a what do I want to say? The driver window in the lower, there's a big U, and so you'll see them on the front of every car. And then I just see them all over the place. They're everywhere now.
It's very innovative, and like Aereo, they've had to fight tooth and nail with some of these localities to be able to get the right to give the citizens what they want. A convenient.
And I honestly don't see what the fight's about, because the Uber is not the people that they're upset with. They should be upset with the people driving the cars, and that's hard to identify. Maybe Lyft you can identify, but not Uber. Uber is a lot harder to know that that's an Uber car.
In Washington D.C., they were literally arresting Uber drivers on the street
Because it is literally illegal.
Well, now it's not. They're compromising. Because, like, what they said, some of the counts, I watched it. I wrote about it for Huffington Post and I put on Google Plus. I covered the D.C. Council meeting when they were discussing. It was really interesting. They said it's not just for rich people. One of the council members who lived in the inner city, I mean, like the bad part of the southeast, whatever.
Well, remember,
he said that
DC's had a taxi problem too.
And a lot of the taxis don't want to go into the rougher areas, and Uber will. And so he said, we can't get a cab on my street. This is a councilman. Or he said some constituents said that, right? Because there are rough parts of D.C., just like Chicago or Dallas or Richmond, any city. And he said that Uber is the only way you can get a ride in that neighborhood. And so they were praising it. And they just said, let's figure something out. Of course, the taxi cabs are heavily regulated, have all these costs and fees, and
we have to remember why they're heavily regulated. We have to remember why they're heavily regulated.
Because they were scamming people.
Time, we did have a lot of wildcat taxis, and they did a lot of bad things.
Yeah, sure. So there's a reason for it, but then this would be a really interesting conversation to have Craig with, but it would be like 2 hours long. But all those regulations
we'll have
usually.
This conversation on Friday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, Google Plus Week.
Excellent.
Next story.
Next up is
Hey, Dan, just so you know, Mr. Funny Man Production wanted to let you know that AT&T sucks. I just wanted to throw that out there. So,
well,
all right, so next up.
It's a good deal. What Uber's doing, I don't think I said the third part, but they're going to switch all their drivers to Android phones. They're going to use. I'm not sure why they're doing that, because AT&T has Apple iPhones.
I don't know where you got that either, because it's not in the story. Next story.
If you go to the blog, I think it's in the blog. I hope I'm not wrong. CNN, but they're going to use AT&T's network, right? So it's a win-win for everybody. All right, next up is a CNN money writer writes, why I broke up with Apple. I decided to throw this out there since it's a big day for Apple. And this is a Tech 30 blog. This is David Goldman. And he says he was a big, like, straight-up Craig Shipp Apple fanboy type guy. And then he said, for all its glitz and glam, the iPhone had a lot of features I didn't need. AirDrop, Passbook, AirPlay, PhotoStream, iTunes Radio. Mostly it just didn't do enough of the stuff that I really cared about. That's why I decided to ditch the iPhone for an Android. He got a Moto X. He loves it. When I want to change directions while I'm driving, I don't hit any buttons. I literally just speak to my phone. Okay, Google, navigate to wherever. When there's traffic, I'll miss my meeting if I didn't leave my Moto X to tell me to get going. An app called Trigger automatically puts my phone into vibrate mode the second I step into my newsroom. That's a neat app. I didn't know about that. I'll admit I miss FaceTime, but not because it's any easier than Google Hangouts, but because all my friends and family have iPhones. Android's widgets are better and more convenient than the iPhone's badge notifications. Google is far, far superior at backing up photos than iCloud in general. It is a confusing mess, and I eventually just shut it off. I could go on. Google just seems to understand me better than Apple. That's true for Microsoft, too. I love my Windows 8 laptops much more than I ever enjoyed my MacBook, which just died 3 years ago. So, etc., etc. I recommend you read this. Any thoughts on this, guys? I'm going to make Craig read this. I'm going to tell Craig I'm not going to... Next time I owe Craig money for something, like when we get a sale and we have to give him his cut, I'm going to tell him I'm not going to give it to him until he gives me the cliff notes on this article. Make sure he reads it. What do you guys think about this? We've heard this before, and we've heard the reverse. We've heard people who have switched from Android to iOS, or have tried Android and then went back to iOS, and
I think this really says the important thing, and that is find what works for you, what has the features you need, because honestly, it's not a one-size-fits-all world. That's really what it boils down to.
True. Like in Craig's case, to be fair, he does a lot of video editing, and I know that his MacBook, or his Mac Pro, which of course is a souped-up Mac, I mean, $10,000 worth of crap, right? Really does fast video editing. Much faster than my Windows machine. Okay, next is Okay, coming up Friday on Google Plus Week, our show where we talk about Google Plus, Google, and just general tech news, and yell at each other more than we do. We're much more polite on Monday nights, I think, because it's Monday. I posted this story and got some traction, and it was a Wall Street Journal story, and I posted the Daily Mail version because it's not paywalled. But the story, a report that Google is going to launch 180 satellites to provide internet access for the entire planet. My initial read was, holy, something I can't say on a show. Although I'm thinking that there would be latency, but then I think you corrected me or disagreed with that. I'm thinking this is more North Korea, Iran, developing world than... It's not going to compete with my Comcast business speed. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think?
No. There will be latency. Satellite networks have a huge latency, but as I pointed out, there are some applications that won't be a problem for. We'll discuss it more on Friday.
Okay. And then also Windows XP. This was neat. I got this, I think my dad emailed this to me. There's a little simple hack, and I linked to it below, that will give you 5 more years of updates for XP. Because what they did was, for the regular XP that I have on my newspaper layout computer, they've discontinued support and everything. But there's a separate version for point of sale terminals,
customers that have purchased extra support. We'll look at what the deal is on Friday.
Yeah, the little hack, you can switch it. And then we'll update it was a good profile about the Hatchet guy, the book publisher who's pissed off at Amazon because Amazon's delisted big authors like Stephen Colbert and Bill O'Reilly, and Malcolm Gladwell.
So more on the Amazon Mafia on Friday.
Okay, so I had one app I wanted to talk about. I can't say I'm recommending it because I just saw it just before the show as I was looking for stuff to talk about tonight. And it's kind of interesting. It's a calendar app, so I'm not recommending you install it. I'm recommending you check it out and read this article about it, see if it is for you. And he says it's the first great calendar app for Android and the web. And they show a little video here. So I'm going to check it out. If you rely a lot on calendar to plan your day, guys like Bruce Turner and Michael Ellis, that kind, sales guys, I recommend you check this out. So I linked to the article here on The Verge, and that's their opinion, so I'll check it out, and the comments look pretty good. So there's that. Also, this is our topic doc, which guides our show. You're welcome to look at this. And this is open. It's also in our list here. This is how we plan the show. If you want to get a what do you call it?
Preview, sneak peek.
Preview, sneak peek.
I don't know what the hell we're talking about.
Exactly. All right, so Google Plus Week is every Friday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time on YouTube Live and Google Plus. This program is Our Android Week. This is broadcasted at 9 p.m. on Monday nights Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, if Cadeus is at home.
Hey, don't blame it on me.
I see finally at the end of the show he has closed his blinds. Was it just the sun was shining or the blinds you just closed?
The sun was shining. My blinds are always closed, but we're ending the show, so let's go.
Okay. I just thought I'd troll you a little bit. All right, so thank you all very much for watching and commenting. We appreciate it. Nick Dollars and Mr. Funnyman Productions says AT&T sucks. So there's that. On that note, have a wonderful Android week. We'll catch you later. Peace.